MH17, we should talk about that, because it's a huge story in the world, especially also in the Netherlands, because the flight left from Amsterdam. You were investigating what happened there, and you were one of the first who came up with answers to what seemed to be a crash and then turned out to be the downing of an airliner. Let's have a look at what happened in the news at the time.
Malaysian Airlines flight has crashed
in eastern Ukraine
by a surface-to-air missile.
This happened in Ukraine near the Russian border.
Right to the chaos at the crash scene.
Tegen het middaguur is vertrokken uit Amsterdam.
When and why did you start your investigation, looking into what had happened here?
So with MH17, really in the immediate aftermath of what happened, a online community started, or multiple communities really, started to form around the incident. And this was just a few days after I launched bellingcat. It was still being crowdfunded. It was just me by myself. But I started seeing stuff coming out from the online spaces that were discussing MH17 that clearly could benefit from kind of open source investigation techniques I'd already been using in Syria for the last couple of years. So I started looking at some of the stuff that people were digging into, geolocating videos, but also sharing stuff with like my audience that I already had established on social media that were really engaged with this kind of stuff as a general topic, and that included journalists who were on the ground. So we had this online community kind of picking apart all the various online evidence, but then journalists on the ground were seeing the work I was publishing at bellingcat and going out and actually following that stuff up. So that in itself, in those early days, was assisting journalists in figuring out what was happening, and led them to finding people who had witnessed the missile launcher being transported. 2 journalists visited the launch site that was identified through open source investigation and spoke to people who saw the field on fire on the day the missile was launched, and soldiers in the area and that kind of thing.
Was it easy to find all this information?
I don't really think of it in terms of easy and hard, because it's kind of just what we did. But it was really like when you're kind of in that moment, you are surrounded by people who, in a sense, they're finding information, they're sharing it, and you're seeing the discussions and the debate around it. And it just seems like this organic growth towards certain conclusions, because this information is just coming to you, you're analyzing it, you're seeing also false information being shared, and that provides various clues. But I was looking at every bolt and rivet of the front end of that aircraft, like really, really careful.
Were you ever asked by the researchers of the joint investigation team here in the Netherlands to share your information with them? Because it took them a year longer to come to the same conclusions as you did with bellingcat, that Russian separatists had fired this rocket to the MH17.
Yeah, I was, myself and a couple of my colleagues were interviewed as witnesses in the case, and that in November 2014, the police came to the UK and interviewed me as a witness, and I went through every single thing we had written, line by line, describing like every single step we took. And I realized years later, that I was actually giving them a free training session, and that's what was going on there more than anything.
Really?
Yeah, it's because they went away, and then after that, they set up their own team to do open source investigation within the joint investigation.
So they copied bellingcat to get their research going.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very new way of investigating. I mean, the police obviously have done various types of digital investigation before, and I found over the years that when, like, the police have had a lot of interest in this, but they usually pull their staff from more traditional investigative teams, like more like cybercrime and cyber fraud, rather than people who have specific open source investigation skills. And that's something that you're also seeing more and more among law enforcement, that they're picking up on those skills and trying to use them.
Yeah, your conclusion led to Russian separatists. The GIT here in the Netherlands came to the same sort of conclusion and also said we couldn't investigate the role of President Putin, but there is maybe reason to think that the order came from the Kremlin. What would you say?
I mean, certainly, there was a lot of military equipment sent from Russia into Ukraine in 2014. The missile launcher that shot down MH17 was not really unique in any way. It was just part of the war that was being fought. what it was possible to establish from our work in the Joint Investigation Team investigation is that the Russian separatists at that time, who were supported directly by the Russian Federation, were struggling with Ukrainian air attacks. So they requested missile launchers were sent over, and they made these missile launchers available to the separatists. There were actually going to be 2 of them that were sent over, but they forgot to bring the truck for the second one. So in a way, the only thing that was unusual about this whole story was that MH17 got shot down. But the fact Russia was sending military equipment over of all types is not something that was unique to that day or anything else. It was an ongoing involvement of Russia in the conflict. And I think that's where MH17 really caused a problem for them, because they had a kind of plausible deniability up until that point, but then there was very clear evidence that this was Russia's involvement in the conflict when they'd been denying it all along.
There is a Dutch cameraman who lost somebody on board of the plane who was very dear and close to him, and he went back with journalists to report on the crash site what had happened there, and he has a very moving story. Here is Joris Hentenaar.
About 10 years ago, I had an assignment in Ukraine to film the crash site of the MH17, to make a report about what happened there. And the crash site is totally black. It's like melted aluminium, rubber, burning rubber. It smells like black. Yeah, I went there to Ukraine, knowing that my babysit child was in the plane and killed. And that makes a strange feeling while you're doing your job. You have to film because that's why you're there. But I also thought, okay, I knew the mama of Rijn, so I thought, what could I bring back for his mama? Because all the relatives were not able to visit the site because of the war situation. So I thought, okay, let me just cut the flowers in the surrounding area of the crash site. So I cut the flowers near the crash site, but then I thought, okay, what can we do with them? Because before they die, we have to do something with them. And I knew a Dutch artist, Bas Meeuws, who makes floral impressions like the Dutch masters in the 17th and the 18th century did. So he took photos of all the flowers individual, and then in Photoshop he makes a bouquet of them. The similarity between Bellingcat and we as cameramen is in a way the same. Bellingcat collects data, I collected flowers, and both parties put them together to create something new, the truth or beauty. And in a way it's a closure, because people need to know the truth, and they also need to have beauty.
Joris Hentenaar, he compares your work to a beautiful photograph. You have been called in the Russian press, Russia Today called you an amateur general, a home garden and kitchen expert and former video gamer, when you published your results on MH17. Are they afraid of you in Moscow?
I always find it interesting looking at how Russia reacts to us. So really from 2015 onwards, there's been a kind of escalating campaign by Russia against bellingcat. It started with articles similar to what you've read there. It involved them sending like a camera crew to my doorstepping my mother, which I wasn't very impressed with. They've written all kinds of articles about me. We've been targeted by the Internet Research Agency for disinformation campaigns. I was sued by the founder and head of Wagner, the mercenary company, for saying that he was the head of Wagner, the mercenary company.
Prigozhin, who was blown away by Putin himself.
Yeah, which was an end of my legal case as well. So
seriously?
Yeah.
That's how it ended?
So he sued me in the UK for tweets that linked to articles by other news organisations that mentioned he was involved with Wagner. So he used the slap laws in the UK, or basically a slap against me, to take me to court. it cost, fortunately bellingcat covered my legal costs, but just to get it to the point where we were going to ask for money to be held in escrow so he would eventually pay the bills, just getting to that point cost us about £90,000 in legal fees. And that's even before any legal stuff started. Yeah. So what happened in the end is Putin invaded Ukraine and his lawyers pulled out of the case because of who he was. And the case collapsed, but it left me and bellingcat out of pocket. But yeah, that's just another example of kind of what happens. And I've been trying to recover the money from him, and then he goes and blows up and makes it very difficult indeed.
That's quite an ending to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just shows people why they shouldn't sue me.
Any questions here? Please stand up and the microphone will come to you. Yeah. Okay, where's the microphone? Here you go.
Hi, my name is Bernette. One of my school friends was on the MH17 plane as well, and I was wondering, to what extent do you feel a connection to the victims of the cases that you investigate?
I try to really avoid that kind of connection in most cases, because when you're dealing with like quite a horrific imagery, it's important to have that kind of detachment from the people. But with MH17 over the years, I have got to know the family members. We've been working on a documentary about MH17 that involves the families as well, and they've been very positive about what we've done so far. So yeah, I think MH17 is a rare example. That plus the victims of chemical weapons in Syria, which is another topic I did a huge amount of work on. It's just, it's been good to talk to those communities, and there are still ongoing kind of accountability efforts with both of those topics as well, so we've been able to support them through that as well.
So, but these are two stories where you met the family members of the victims, but normally you try to distance yourself from the emotions of family members because that could interfere with the research that you are doing?
Well, one thing that's really important in this kind of work is understanding the impact of vicarious trauma. So that's trauma that could be PTSD, it's very other types of trauma, where by looking at lots of horrifying images, it can have a deep impact on you.
That's what you are doing, right?
So a big part of that not having an impact is compartmentalization of, you're looking at an image, you're doing a piece of research, you aren't thinking about, these people being human beings with families, because if you do that all the time, then it quickly becomes overwhelming. And like at bellingcat, we offer our staff kind of psychological support. We are very open about these issues. There's been other human rights organizations who have tried to ignore these issues, and that's led to lots of problems for those organizations. So it's something that you need to deal with head on.
Do you get help yourself or assistance with everything that you have seen and heard?
I think I was quite lucky. I used to have quite a lot of anxiety, and by doing this work, it's actually helped really build my confidence a lot. So I think that's maybe acted to balance out all the terrible traumatic stuff that I'm saying. But a lot of it is, I think, just through being quite practiced at doing it as well.
Yeah.
Because like I spoke about with the early videos, I would not listen to what people were saying, but also generally you want to turn the audio videos off if you're looking at something that involves someone like injured or in pain, or people who are scared, because it's the kind of audio, it's that kind of subconscious kind of your reaction to that sound that actually can trigger the trauma response. So often when you're watching these videos, you'll not watch them with any volume on either, just so you're not having that extra trigger kind of in your headspace.
Right. We have good people here in this crowd, nothing happening. So, Joris Hentenaar, the cameraman that you just saw and who has worked in the Ukraine, he wanted to be here tonight, but he was reporting, filming somewhere, and he's in awe with your work, and he asked us to give you something from him that we have here, and we hope you will unpack it. I'm absolutely sure that this came directly from Joris. This is a little gift from him to you.
Would you like me to open it here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not ticking, so that's good. Oh yeah, there we go. Do you see that? That's the print that he was talking about.
Right, the sunflowers from the crash site of the MH17.
That's right.
Yeah.